Have you ever had the feeling that something watches as the rain falls? I'm not talking about people at the window or animals taking shelter from the storm. It's something different, something that moves when no one is looking, that creeps through the wet shadows, that breathes amidst the thunder, and that, for some reason no one understands, is thirsty, a thirst that can only be quenched with water falling from the sky. I know what you're probably thinking. Another one of those stories made up just to scare you before bed. But what I'm about to tell you now isn't funny at all. Ever since I was a child, I've always been told not to look outside for too long when it starts to rain. And I, of course, thought that was stupid until the night I heard it for the first time. It was a common storm, the kind that rattles the windows and makes a house seem smaller than it really is. The raindrops tapped on the roof like impatient fingers. I was alone, sitting in the dark of the living room, listening to the sound of water running through the gutters. That's when I heard it. A sound, subtle, an almost human noise, like someone was swallowing something hard, like drinking. The sound came from the backyard, right where the water accumulated near the drain. I thought it was my imagination, but then came the whisper, creeping, cold, almost breathless. "Give me more." I froze. My eyes strained to find some silhouette outside, but there was only pitch black and water. And yet, I swear to everything there was something there, something bent over, crouched, with its fingers dug into the wet ground and its mouth pressed against the puddle, sucking desperately. It was as if it were feeding on the rain. Ever since that night, I've noticed he appears whenever the water starts falling. He doesn't knock. He doesn't try to come in. He just waits for the water to flow, and drinks, as if that's the only thing keeping his body alive. But that was just the beginning. What happened after that night, no one ever told me, and perhaps rightly so, because some truth shouldn't be heard with dry ears, least of all when the next storm is about to begin. Santa Route has never appeared on tourist maps. It's a forgotten village, hidden among hills covered in dense forest and dirt roads that disappear into the mist, a place where time seems slower, where the air is heavy even on dry days. Though, truth be told, dry days are rare there. In Santa Route, rain isn't just a weather phenomenon. It's a constant, silent, insistent presence. The sound of drops hitting the roof tiles is so common that residents no longer notice it, or pretend not to. It rains so much there that people have learned to live with galoshes always at hand, patched roofs, and clothes hanging indoors. But what few outsiders know, and those inside avoid discussing, is that along with the rain, something else often arrives, something neither quite human nor animal, a creature no one can quite describe, but everyone recognizes by what it leaves behind. Exactly 42 years ago, during a series of storms that lasted 9 days straight, the disappearances began. First, an 8-year-old boy named Enzo, then a 6-year-old girl, Isadora. In just over a week, 4 children vanished without a trace. What connected them all? The clothes found near clogged drains, always wet, always freshly washed by the rain. And another, more disturbing detail, thin, deep marks scratched into the walls and gates, as if nails or claws had been dragged there with force. The authorities investigated, of course, but how can you explain something without logic, without clues, without a body? Residents began to whisper among themselves, with suspicious looks and muffled speech. This is how the name began to spread. The Thirsty One. That's what they called what they believed lived in the cracks, under the storm drains, among the dark veins of the trees, waiting for the right moment, waiting for the water to recede so it could then rise. The curious thing is that almost no one talked about it directly, but there was always a warning, a disguised tip, a strange piece of advice. Don't leave standing water in the yard. Close the windows when it rains, but don't lock the back doors. Don't talk loudly when it rains. He can hear you. It was as if everyone knew it, but refused to admit it, like trying not to wake a sleeping animal. The most disturbing thing about this whole story, however, is what's written in the yellowed pages of Donna Lorina's diary. She was the village midwife for nearly 50 years. She knew every street, every birth, every secret buried among the damp wooden houses. At the end of her life, isolated and nearly blind, she began writing down everything she knew, as if trying to warn someone, or to free herself from a guilt too heavy to bear. In the final pages, her handwriting becomes shaky, with stains that might have been tears or rain. Among the disjointed, sentences, and hastily crossed out words. One note haunts me to this day. He moves through the water. He has no eyes, but he sees. He has no mouth, but he drinks. And he never forgets the taste of those who heard the first whisper. The diary was found weeks after Lorena disappeared. The bed was still made. The stove was off. The back door was open, dripping. And outside, in the mud, deep footprints leading toward the stream. These stories never made it into the newspaper, not even into the local police station's archives. But anyone who lives, or has lived, in Santa Root knows there's a reason for so much water. A reason the older folks don't have the courage to explain. They just close their eyes when it starts to rain and hope that, this time, the thirsty one isn't so hungry. But not everyone was so lucky. One of them decided to face the truth, and what he discovered was far worse than any legend that haunts that village forgotten by the light. His name was Jonas, 16 years, old and far too curious for his own good. The only son of a retired teacher, he lived in the last house on Rua do Pinhal, one of the oldest in Santa Root, almost nestled against the woods, separated from the rest of the village by a broken fence and a stream that doubled in volume on stormy days. He was a quiet, calm boy, the kind who prefers the sound of headphones to the din of conversation. But that week, for a science project, he decided to record natural sounds. The topic was simple: the influence of rain on urban environments. His choice? To record the sound of water in places no one else dared to go. He set out with a portable recorder borrowed from school and a fixed idea in his head: to capture the purest, rawest sounds of rain falling in Santa Root. It started with leaking roofs, dripping on leaves, water running down rusty gutters. But it didn't stop there. Jonas wanted more. He said there was something different about the sounds near the ground. He wanted to capture what no one heard. He began recording beside the storm drains, near the backs of houses, where the puddles took a long time to dry, until he reached the entrance to the village's old sewer, a forgotten concrete tunnel, covered in slime and surrounded by weeds, where the water ran dark even when it wasn't raining. It was the kind of place where children were forbidden to play, where adults crossed quickly and silently. That afternoon he entered alone. The rain was still light, but the thunder already foretold what was to come. He placed the recorder near the tunnel opening, tied it with tape to a piece of rusty iron, and left. He told his mother he would return the next day when the storm passed to retrieve the equipment. He never returned. The next morning, the residents found only the recorder, lying on the damp ground, with the display blank and the record button still pressed. It was soaked, almost useless, but someone had the idea of drying the memory card and trying to listen to what had been captured. The audio begins with the usual sound of rain, drops hitting concrete, wind rustling the leaves, a distant car passing on the dirt road. But gradually, the noises change. There are cracking sounds, similar to wood splitting, but more muffled, as if something were moving beneath the wet earth. Then heavy, almost animalistic breathing, but rhythmic, hungry, and then a long, deep sniff, seemingly coming from very close to the microphone. Seconds of silence, and then the whisper: hoarse, broken, wet, water. Give me water. The voice wasn't that of a child, nor an adult. It didn't sound human. It was as if the rain itself had learned to speak, as if the wind had pulled at a vocal cord that shouldn't have been there. After the whisper, what's heard is an even more disturbing sound, the sound of something being sucked, sip after sip, not like someone drinking from a cup, but as if the water were being ripped straight from the ground, forcefully, desperately, a wet, humid, visceral sucking. The audio lasts over 7 minutes, and at no point is Jonas's voice heard. Nothing, not a scream, not a footstep, not a breath, as if he had disappeared without a fight, without running away, as if he had been absorbed. His mother handed the recorder over to the police, but the investigation was closed weeks later, without concrete evidence. The only notation in the official report was a cold observation: equipment damaged by humidity, audio of no investigative relevance. But the copy of the file, the one secretly made by a friend of Jonas's before everything was confiscated, still circulates around the village, on flash drives, cell phones, encrypted folders. Only the bravest listen to it until the end. Many can't even get past the part where the sound changes. They say that those who listen to the end never hear the rain the same way again. Some report dreaming about puddles moving on their own. Others report hearing tapping in the pipes in the early hours of the morning. Some claim that after listening to that audio, they began finding drops of water where they shouldn't be, on the bed, on the pillow, in the sock drawer, as if something there was trying to remind you that you're still thirsty. And now you know who heard it. But the strangest thing of all, the one that never left my mind, was what the school janitor told me a few days later. He swore he saw Jonas in the middle of the night, standing in the middle of the schoolyard, unblinking, completely soaked. As he approached, the boy disappeared like mist, but he left a trail, a trickle of water leading straight to the gate and beyond. And it was precisely by following this thread that another discovery was made, something that may reveal what truly lives beneath the concrete of Santa Root. But before we talk about that, you need to understand who else was involved with this entity and why some would rather disappear than let this secret spread. After Jonas's disappearance, a strange, almost ritualistic silence fell over the village. It wasn't discussed publicly, but doors began to be locked earlier. Lights remained on during the rainy early mornings, even after everyone had gone to bed, and footsteps on the sidewalk seemed more hurried, as if the very earth had become less safe when soaked. But what truly began to spread fear wasn't what happened to him, but what came after. The week after the last heavy rain, Donna Cidalia, a resident of Rua do Cedro, reported seeing something strange on the roof of her neighbor's house. It was early in the morning, and she had woken to the insistent sound of tiles creaking. She thought it was the wind, until she noticed a figure slowly crawling along, its movements resembling neither a cat nor a burglar. It was hunched over, almost too hunched to be human, and it lingered over the areas where the water was running down the hardest. She couldn't see its face, but she swears it smelled of mold and wet earth. She said that for a moment, the creature seemed to lie down in a puddle on the roof, and then it began to tremble, as if feeding on its own mud. Other reports began to emerge soon after. Mr. Augusto, a retiree living in the back of the village, installed a security camera in his backyard, tired of losing chickens. He never caught a thief, but one rainy night, at 3:18 a.m., the camera recorded something that neither he nor the technicians who tried to review the video could explain. What appears is a crouched figure, facing away, with pitch-black skin and a wet body, reflecting the light like a living puddle. He was motionless on the ground, and only moved when a bolt of lightning lit the sky for 2 seconds. At that moment he turned his face, or something that appeared to be his face, toward the camera, and the video froze. Copies were made and analyzed on cell phones, computers, and televisions. In every attempt, the recording became corrupted at the exact same second. At the exact moment the creature moved. The strangest thing is that, in the following days, the camera never recorded anything again. It worked normally during the day, but whenever it rained, the system shut down automatically. Technical support stated there was no mechanical failure. It could be an electrical interference issue, they said, but no one could explain why, at that exact second, the image always disappeared. And it doesn't stop there. During maintenance work on the old drainage networks, a city employee, who preferred to remain anonymous, reported that the team was called in to clear one of the central drains that was constantly clogged. Breaking through one of the concrete slabs, they found an underground passageway not found on any city map, a wide tunnel with damp walls that spiraled downward. Inside, the water barely flowed, but the smell was indescribable, something between rot and rusted iron. They descended with flashlights but didn't get very far. The ground was covered in a mixture of mud, small and large bones, many of them broken as if they had been bitten. The walls bore deep marks, as if claws or slender fingers had been dragged across the stone. In some spots, the concrete appeared corroded, and, on a curve below, one of the flashlights illuminated a figure drawn in something dark, perhaps dried blood or soot, representing a being with long arms and a hunched torso, with drops of water coming from its mouth. The image resembled a man, but it wasn't. There was something wrong with the limbs, the position of the bones, in the empty gaze that seemed to scream even in silence. Frightened, the workers sealed the entrance and told management there was no safe passage. The official report refers to unstable and unsanitary tunnels, but among themselves the story is different. Some say they heard sounds from below before even entering. Others claim the echo preceded the speech, and no one, absolutely no one, wanted to return to the site after that night. Despite all this, local authorities remain firm in their version. Mass hysteria, ancient superstitions, nothing concrete. But what's most frightening isn't the denial, it's the caution. No police officer goes out on patrol when it rains. No city employee responds to calls during storms. The school closes its gates 2 hours early when the sky darkens. Buses don't even run along Rua do Pinhal after 6. And every time a reporter tries to visit the village to investigate the rumors, it rains, as if something wants to cover the tracks before they become too visible. But it's not just the old residents who bear the brunt of all this. There's someone closer than you think, who decided to investigate on their own. And what they found may prove that Thirsty isn't just a legend. He's truly hungry. And you've already chosen your next tune. Have you ever really stopped to listen? I'm not talking about listening just for the sake of listening. I'm talking about truly paying attention to the sound the water makes as it runs down the gutter, or as it slowly drips into the corner of the porch. There's a rhythm there, almost hypnotic, a flow that seems to follow a strange pattern, as if obeying something invisible, a kind of wet rhythm that, if you listen long enough, starts to sound different. And if it happens to be raining there right now, maybe you're hearing it too. But there's one detail few people notice. Sometimes, between the roar of the water and the rush of the wind, an out-of-place sound emerges, a breath, or the crackle of something approaching through the sodden earth. Not everyone notices, only those who are already half-connected, who have already listened too much, those who saw what they shouldn't have, heard what they shouldn't have, or worse yet, responded. Have you ever tried to pinpoint where exactly that sound is coming from? Ever wondered why it seems louder near open windows? Why does the water seem to run faster when someone walks by? It's as if she's afraid, or worse, as if she's being pulled, consumed. I once stared at a puddle for nearly 20 minutes. It was just water, clear, still, but at a certain point, it began to tremble on its own. There was no wind, no vibration, just that liquid swaying gently, as if something were breathing beneath it. I didn't have the courage to move, and when I finally took a step back, I heard it, a whisper, not loud, not clear, but it was there, right, on the border between hearing and instinct. More. That's why I say, if you're at home right now, and it suddenly starts raining, stay away from the cracks, avoid mirrors when you're wet, and, as strange as it may seem, never collect rainwater if you're not sure no one else is watching you. Because the thirst doesn't appear as a monster. He doesn't tear down doors. He doesn't break through windows. He waits. He waits for the right time. He waits for you to let your guard down. Some reports say it begins with subtle touches, dampness where there shouldn't be any, leaks in newly renovated ceilings, footsteps on still wet floors even when you're alone. Then comes the presence, that feeling of something watching you from the other side of the fogged-up window, following you on the way to the bathroom, stepping softly behind you in the kitchen when all the lights are off. And then it whispers, once, twice, and if you listen until the end, it's too late. That's why the ancients of Santa Root never left buckets in the yard. They never stored rainwater in bottles, because they knew it could get in there, because they knew it didn't need open doors, just a damp path. And don't think it's just there. Don't make the mistake of thinking this kind of thing is confined to an isolated village. Rainwater is the same everywhere. It runs off the same roofs, enters the same pipes, touches the same ground. If Thirsty is learning, if he's evolving, perhaps he's past hiding. Maybe he's testing who listens, watching who pays too much attention. Maybe he just needs a chance, a moment when you forget and leave the faucet running after a rainstorm, or when you're distracted, staring at a puddle in the street reflecting the cloudy sky, and think what you saw there was just a reflection, just a shadow, just your imagination. What if it isn't? What if that thing you saw flashing in the water had eyes that wait for you to sleep, or listen just a little longer, just one more time? Because for him, the more water runs, the thirstier he gets. And there's something you might not have noticed yet, or have chosen to ignore. It's just that every time the rain falls, he gets closer. If this story gave you goosebumps, kept you hooked until the end, or if you'll now think twice before looking at a puddle of water, please leave a like to support the channel. This helps me immensely to continue bringing you stories like this, stories that mess with your head and chill your spine. Take advantage and sign up here, because there's much more to come. Stories you've never heard, legends no one had the courage to tell, and records that perhaps shouldn't even exist. And hey, if you still have the courage, click on the video on the side. There's another dark story there that will make you rethink everything you believe about what really lives among us when it starts to rain.